Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the College Football Show here on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette Sports YouTube channel. I'm Noah Hiles. He is Andrew Destin. And Andrew, you've experienced your first loss as a full-time employee at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Rough weekend out in Ann Arbor for the Nittany Lions, huh?
Yeah, not an easy one for them. I felt foolish, honestly, with my pick. I said it was going to be a tight one and that Michigan was going to win by maybe a touchdown, 4 points, something like that. And I didn't think I was alone on that one. Could have been more than wrong. At least I had the right team winning, but not a pretty one for Penn State. And when you give up the fourth most rushing yards ever in a game by Penn State, you'd be hard pressed to think they're going to win. So line of scrimmage, trenches. James Franklin said it was not close.
I heard on the broadcast, and it was like midway through the game. I forget who said it, but they were like, this is reminiscent of Michigan against Ohio State last year where they ran for like 500 yards or something. And I was like, no, it's not going to be that bad, right? And like, it just never stopped. And, that first half was so deceiving with the score because of those, two big plays they had by the defense that made it an actual game. But really, I mean, Michigan dominated that one from start to finish.
Yeah, totally.
So.
You're totally right about that. In the third quarter, Penn State got the ball to start it off and actually had a huge chunk play from the receiver. Clifford found Harrison Wallace the third, and they made a field goal, and they were up 17-16, like, into the third quarter, and you're thinking, wow, miraculously, this might be close. No, 25 points in a row. Not particularly close at all. But unlike myself, you were off this week, Noah, with Pitt, but sounds like got another one coming up, ACC matchup, and there's a quarterback who sounds like may or may not need to be proving himself for the Panthers.
It really is time for Kedon Slovis to step up, in my opinion, Andrew. I mean, everyone likes to talk about the offensive line, likes to talk about Izzy Abanikanda. Maybe we see not Rodney Gallagher, the recruit out of this area, Rodney Hammond Jr., excuse me. We might see him actually run the football. He dressed in their last game against Virginia Tech, but he did not play. I would expect to see him probably running the football a couple times this upcoming Saturday. And, everyone likes to talk about the other things. I mean, Pitt, 2 midseason All-Americans on the defensive side of the ball with Hallett and Kalijah Cansey. But we got to talk more about Kedon Slovis. I mean, they abandoned the passing attack in the second half against Virginia Tech. The result ended up being the starting running back breaking Tony Dorsett's program record in a single game, rushing for 320 yards and 6 touchdowns. But you got to assume that Louisville's going to be looking to stop the run, kind of like how Georgia Tech lined up, loaded that box, said, go ahead, Kedon Slovis, try and beat us. And if Pitt wasn't talented enough and strong enough in the trenches to just, and again, they didn't have Abanikanda, but to just jam it down Georgia Tech's throat, you got to assume they're not going to be able to do that against Louisville either. They're going to need a better effort from Kedon Slovis. They just lost a receiver to the transfer portal and Jaden Bradley. I don't know. I don't know what to expect from Kedon moving forward, but I will say if this team hopes to go to Charlotte and compete for another ACC championship and play in that title game against whoever they'll see in the better side of that conference, it's got to start now with number 9, because through the first 6 games of the season, the 4.5 that he played in, he didn't impress many people. I do think he still has the physical tools to be a really good quarterback. And I don't think it's all completely on him. I think some of the chemistry issues fall on the offensive coordinators, play calling against inferior opponents where they kind of probably should have tried to work some stuff in a little bit more. And I don't think the receivers have really been up to snuff or as good as they should have been. But that all needs to be fixed starting Saturday against Louisville. And we're going to find out, how big this issue is with Pitt's passing attack based upon, having a week to recuperate with the bye and then a week to prepare for Louisville. If they still can't get it together, it might be just reality that they're a one-dimensional offense. So that's something that I have my eye on. We'll focus now on your team, Andrew. Penn State, another solid matchup. Not as exciting as it was a couple weeks ago when you looked at the slate and you're like, wow, ranked. Minnesota has since, kind of cooled down a little bit, lost was it Illinois last week?
Yep.
Yeah, I know. I had the Illini with the points. I should have known that. So, but the Gophers coming into town, right? Home game in Happy Valley. And This is an interesting matchup for many reasons. I mean, they're coming off of a butt whooping. They got Ohio State the following week, but they have to win this one. And I think the most interesting thing that everyone's wondering is it finally Drew Allar time? We've seen him in pretty much every game Penn State's had. I actually do think we've seen him in every single football game that Penn State has played this year. We saw him come in the second half against Michigan because of an injury more than out of necessity or scheme. But one way or another, do you think the 5-star recruit makes his first start?
There's a shot, and I don't think that's performance related to Clifford. I think it very well might be injury related. We saw today at practice, the Wednesday night practice, Sean Clifford was practicing. He very much so was. And this is a little bit of speculation on my part, so don't take it as, this is the word of the law or anything like that. But Clifford did not throw a pass during the portion of practice that we saw. All the other quarterbacks did. There's 4 scholarship quarterbacks on roster. Christian Veyer threw. Bo Pribula threw. Drew Allar most certainly threw. Sean did not. He was fully dressed. He was wearing pads, helmet, the whole shebang, and he was handing off to his running backs, but we did not see him throw a pass. And it was hinted at during the national television broadcast on Fox that in that fourth quarter that Clifford was favoring his right shoulder, his throwing shoulder. Now, we'll never know one way or another if that's the truth, if that's the injury, but it sounds like that might be an issue for Sean. And if that's the case, then you very well might be seeing the Drew Allar show on Saturday. And if that's the case, statistically speaking, the two haven't been terribly different. Drew has definitely shown a better ability to throw the ball downfield, but if we're strictly comparing numbers to numbers, after the Michigan game, Clifford has completed 58% of his passes. Allar has completed 58% of his passes, albeit very different situations. But to your point, Noah, Drew's been in almost every game. It was only at Northwestern where he didn't get to come in, but every game pretty much he's gotten into out of the 6. He's played in 5 of them, and he's impressed. He's flashed. He's shown those plays. So if Sean is not 100% or able to go throwing the football, that's problematic for Penn State, and that's where you might be seeing Drew Allar start. So who knows? There's a lot of time between Wednesday night until Saturday morning, certainly. But right now, there's reason to believe that Drew could be in play, at the very least to get some time, at the very least to get some repetitions, which we've seen in 5 of 6 games. I tend to believe that, however this game goes, if it's one-sided in either direction, you'd see Drew. If there's injury-related reasons that keep Sean out, that might be a reason that we see Drew. But either way, definitely an exciting time if you're a Penn State football fan in terms of the quarterback play, because once again, it seems like we're talking about the Sean versus Drew debate, and now there's an added element with the injury component, which wasn't even in play at the beginning of the year when fans were saying it's Drew Allar time. Now there's that element to it as well.
Let's have a little bit of fun here. All right. We're going to do what we should never do when we're actually writing, but we're on YouTube. We're having fun. We're going to speculate based off of a hypothetical. Okay. Let's say Drew Allar starts against Minnesota and he lights it up. He throws for 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, and even runs one in. It's the best Penn State's offense has looked all year, better than they looked against Purdue, against Ohio, against everyone, even against Auburn. Best they've done. And Sean Clifford does not play one down. It's just Drew Allar, first through fourth quarter, and he looks fantastic. Does he start against Ohio State the following week?
Oh, excellent question, Noah. I'm using as evidence James Franklin's answers to those types of questions. I'm going to say no, but I will say that it'll be a shorter leash. And the only reason I say that is because going into the Michigan game, my thought process was if they get down 3 scores, then it's Drew Allar time. Now, obviously, injury played a factor, but Allar came in when Penn State was down 3 scores. That's when he entered. But Franklin said on Tuesday that, Sean has earned the right to be the starter. He deserves to be on the field, all those sorts of things. So I think in Franklin's mind, Sean is still the starter. One game where Drew does phenomenally, it's one thing if it's against Minnesota. The issue being that Minnesota is not Ohio State, Minnesota is not Michigan. If you would ask me that question after the Michigan game where Drew plays the entire game, leads Penn State to victory, I think we're having a different conversation. But I think in the eyes of Penn State fans, in the eyes of the coaching staff, players, they should beat Minnesota, right? It's a home game. Minnesota's reeling. Tanner Morgan might not play, in serious care after getting hurt against Illinois. It's a whiteout home game. There's all these factors at play that would make you say Penn State should win the game. So that's the reason that I'll take the opposite stance and say that Clifford would still start. plus the veteran, leadership experience, all that sort of thing. But it's a conversation that has to be had again. And I know the coaching staff players don't love that because Sean is their guy. He's their captain, the 4-year captain, all those sorts of things. But Drew is knocking on the door. And whether that's, on Saturday, whether that's after the season or sometime in between, who knows? But he's a 5-star for a reason. He's shown that talent. And Saturday is going to be interesting. But if he gets the nod and he performs well, we've got a heck of a week coming up before Ohio State. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I guess my counterpoint to all that would be just what has Sean Clifford done this year? And I get it, like he's an established guy, he's been the leader of the program for a long time, but I mean we know his record against ranked teams, and I don't know. I mean you're not benching a Heisman winner. You're not benching Pat White when he was playing at West Virginia. You're not benching even someone like Trace McSorley, who I think has probably had a better career at Penn State than Sean Clifford. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, like I mean, Sean Clifford he's played in a lot of games, but I don't know. I don't think he has the resume to just be deemed the starter no matter what, especially if someone shows more promise both in the present and especially the future, considering that, they're probably on the outside looking in now for the college football playoff. So midway through the season, if you can believe it, a lot of good stuff has happened. And as we've seen, every national media outlet is dropping their mid-season All-American team. There's been guys for Pitt. There's been guys for Penn State on these. And we'll leave the All-American talk to the side. We'll just focus on one player, Andrew. Through 7 weeks, excuse me, some players have stood out. And this is the time of the year, mid-October, where we're in the Heisman watch now. We're looking for guys' Heisman moment, if you will. When I think of Heisman moments, real quick, I would love, when you hear the word Heisman moment, I would love to hear what comes to your mind first. For me, it's Cam Newton had a run against LSU, and that is is that yours too?
Yeah, 100% mine. Yeah,
and that, like, I remember watching that highlight. Like, I remember watching that game, but then like I was in high school at the time, and I remember like watching it at my locker, like before first period, and being like, "Oh, this dude's gonna win this thing," because like you didn't know much about Cam Newton beforehand, and
right.
That's like the first Heisman moment. Like there are definitely ones before that I can recall, but like that's the one that really stuck out for me. We might have seen a Heisman moment last weekend with Hendon Hooker. I guess so. We'll wrap the show up by me asking, is this Hendon Hooker's award to lose right now, Andrew, based off of what he's done so far this year, what he and his team did against the Alabama Crimson Tide last weekend? Is this his award to lose, or do guys like CJ Stroud, maybe some running backs throughout the country, can other guys still outplay him, or does he just have to continue playing like he does and he's taking it home?
So Hendon Hooker has bought himself a ton with that win against Alabama, which electric moment. Knew people who were in that area and said it was incredible on Saturday night there in Knoxville at Rocky Top. But I will say this point about Hendon Hooker is that unfortunately for him, or fortunately, depending on which way you want to look at it, still has to play Kentucky, still has to play Georgia. And I got to think they lose at least one of those games. So given that, yes, as of right now today, it's Hendon Hooker's to lose, but I'll still say that my pick preseason was CJ Stroud, and I'm going to stick with him as the guy who I think eventually will be the Heisman winner, assuming that Ohio State runs the table, is able to get revenge against Michigan, and get to the Big Ten championship game, get a spot in the college football playoff, all that sort of jazz. But as of right now, Hendon Hooker has done by and far all that has been asked of him and needed of him. He's done that and more. And I know you got to see him live, which gotta say I'm pretty jealous of that one. But that contest against Pitt, right? Like that was probably one of the lower moments of the season for Hendon in the first half and how they played, but then they storm back, right? They get back into the game. And since then, he's been lights out.
I mean, in a Heisman campaign should have multiple moments, and you could argue that his first big moment of the season came against Pitt. The throw he made in overtime. That was the game-winning touchdown. I will say that a lot of Hooker's moments are responsible for an incredible play made by Hyatt, who had 6 catches for 200-something yards and 5 touchdowns against Alabama. So that might have something to do with it, but I'm not going to sit here and say Stroud doesn't have receivers. I mean, my goodness, like
yeah.
he's got a receiving core at Ohio State that's probably better than some NFL teams. And I'm not even joking when I say that. I think there are like the Jaguars would rather have Ohio State's receivers than what they have now.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't lost a beat. Last year they had 2 first-round draft picks. And you could say it's a better receiving core. Come on.
But just knowing that, I mean, you look, I think Hooker's Heisman moment actually might come against Georgia. Like if they beat Georgia, forget Kentucky. They can lose to Kentucky. But if they beat Georgia after already beating Alabama, because Georgia's going to be number 1 when they play. It probably will be 1 versus 3 or 1 versus 2, depending on how the college football playoff rankings, or at the very worst, 2-3. But if you do that after the Bama thing, you got to give it to him. I don't care if they lose out afterward. For him to do, to have a great performance against Georgia. So that's why I would say it's his to lose, because he does have the whole, it's all in place for him. And people thought about this kind of like with Burrow, where is he having his best games too early? Like he still has to play X, Y, and Z, because they beat Bama pretty early in his Heisman season too, if you don't recall.
Yep.
But then Tua went down and that buzz kind of died, and he just kept doing it. He just kept doing it against everyone. The SEC championship game, all of it. And this could be the same thing with Hooker. It really could. And if it's not, though, I do think it's a 2-person race at this. Stroud has the same opportunity late in the season against Michigan, who's clearly a very good football team. You would know firsthand with that. Just seeing what their defense is capable of and how tough they are. And if Stroud, just the people who vote on these things, we're suckers for a good storyline, right? And for him having lost to Michigan the year prior to get that revenge, end of the season, exclamation point on the campaign, and then they're going to blow out whoever they even play in that stupid Big Ten championship on that one-sided conference. I can't say really anything because the ACC is the exact same way. But
yeah, come on, Purdue wants to have a word with you.
Yeah, right. All right, my bad. So yeah, I think that it's Hendon's to lose, but he's got to be like Joe Burrow, like I said, in 19. Otherwise, it's going to be Stroud, and I think in a landslide. So it's another show, Andrew. Any final thoughts as we wrap up here?
Well, whiteout coming up on Saturday. Gotta say, going to be an exciting environment, but I'm curious to see how it goes. It's not Ohio State or Michigan. Can't recall the last time, aside from Auburn last year, can't think of the last time it was a Big Ten opponent that wasn't either of those teams. So very curious to see how that kind of environment is, especially the week removed from that performance against Michigan. Expecting still a good time, definitely in the stadium. But, the fan base here at Penn State, not happy with the last performance. So expecting a little bit more of a muted whiteout crowd, but only time will tell.
Louisville is actually having a red out against Pitt. It's not what fans are wearing, though. It's just all the empty seats because it's an 8 o'clock kick between Pitt and Louisville. No, I'm just kidding. Be sure to follow us all on social media. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And keep tuning in. We'll have more content for you every Thursday here for our college football show on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel.